I'm 88 years old, and I regret the silence I chose over honesty. At this age, there isn't much left to organize or fix. Most of what could be repaired has already settled into its. The house is quiet now. Too quiet. And when it's quiet like this, the past doesn't knock. It just walks in and sits down across from me. I used to believe silence was a kind of strength. That if I kept my thoughts to myself, if I didn't stir the waters, if I let things pass instead of confronting them, I was being wise, mature, dignified. I see it differently now. When I was a young man in my 20s, I didn't think of myself as someone who avoided honesty. I thought I was practical. I worked hard. I kept my head down. I didn't complain. I didn't burden people with feelings. That's what I had been taught. My father wasn't a talker. He came home, ate dinner, read the paper, and went to bed. If something bothered him, we never knew. My mother filled the quiet with small talk about neighbors and weather, but the real things, fear, disappointment, loneliness, those stayed hidden. I learned early that love meant providing, not speaking. So when I married at 27, I brought that same silence into my own home. My wife, Anna, was different. She talked, not endlessly, but openly. She would ask me what I was thinking. She would tell me when something hurt her. She believed that saying things out loud made them lighter. I believed the opposite. If something upset me, I swallowed it. If I felt misunderstood, I told myself it didn't matter. If I was tired or worried about money, I carried it alone. I thought I was protecting her from stress. But silence has weight. It doesn't disappear. It settles between two people like dust. In our early years, it didn't seem serious. We were busy. I worked long hours at a manufacturing plant. Overtime was steady, and we needed it. There was a mortgage. Then children. 2 boys, 3 years apart. Life became schedules and grocery lists and school forms. There were moments when Anna would look at me across the dinner table and say, "You're far away again." And I would shrug. Just tired. That was my answer to everything. Just tired. I wasn't lying. I was tired. But I was also afraid. Afraid that if I said I felt overwhelmed, I would seem weak. Afraid that if I admitted I didn't know how to balance work and fatherhood, I would look incompetent. Afraid that if I told her I sometimes felt invisible in my own life, she wouldn't understand. So I said nothing. When the boys were young, they would tug at my sleeve and ask me to come outside. Throw a ball. Watch them ride their bikes. Sometimes I went. Often, I said I had things to do. There were always things to do. Fix the sink. Review the bills. Prepare for the next day. I told myself there would be more Saturdays, more summers, more time. The silence wasn't just about arguments or feelings. It was about praise, too. I don't remember telling my sons I was proud of them. I felt it. I did. When one of them brought home a drawing from school, or when the other scored a goal in a neighborhood game, my chest would tighten with something warm. But the words didn't come. In my mind, they knew. Why wouldn't they know? Years later, my eldest told me he never knew if I approved of him. He said it calmly, almost casually. We were sitting in this same living room. He was in his 40s by then. I remember feeling confused. I had worked my entire life for them. How could he not know? But work is not the same as words. I see that now. The slow cost of silence is that it doesn't explode. It erodes. Anna would try, sometimes, to pull me into conversations. "Are you happy?" she asked me once, after the boys had gone to bed. I laughed a little. "What kind of question is that?" "A real one," she said. I told her happiness wasn't something grown adults chased. We had responsibilities. That was enough. I thought I was being sensible. What I was really saying was, "I don't know how to answer you." There were arguments, of course. Not shouting matches. We weren't that kind of couple. Ours were quiet disagreements. She would say she felt alone. I would say she was overthinking. She would ask me to open up. I would promise to try. And then I wouldn't. Not because I didn't care. Because I didn't know how to cross that distance I had built myself. In my 40s, I was promoted to a supervisory role. It meant more money, more hours, more pressure. I told myself this was success. This was what a good man did. I missed a school play because of a late shipment at the factory. I remember Anna's voice on the phone. "He looked for you in the audience." I said I was sorry. I meant it. But I also thought, it's just one play. There would be others. There weren't, not really. Childhood doesn't repeat itself. My younger son stopped asking me to come to his games after a while. He would just tell his mother the time and leave it at that. I noticed. I told myself he was becoming independent. It was easier than admitting he had stopped expecting me. Silence creates stories in other people's heads, and you don't get to edit them. Anna and I grew older side by side, but not always together. We functioned well. Bills were paid. Holidays were organized. Photos were taken. In the pictures, we looked like a happy family. Maybe we were, in a way. There was no betrayal. No dramatic collapse. Just a steady thinning of something that had once been bright. The turning point came quietly, like most important things do. Anna was 67 when she was diagnosed. Pancreatic cancer. By the time they found it, it had already spread. We sat in the doctor's office holding hands. I remember the hum of the air conditioner. I remember thinking the doctor looked too young to be delivering news like that. On the drive home, she stared out the window. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles hurt. That night she said, "We don't have time for silence anymore." I didn't understand at first. Then she said, "Tell me what you've never told me." I wish I could say the words poured out of me. That decades of restraint cracked open in one brave moment. They didn't. I struggled. Even then. I told her I loved her. That part was easy. I had said that before. But the rest, the fears, the regrets, the ways I had felt small or unsure, the times I had chosen work because I didn't know how to choose intimacy, that came out in pieces. Awkward. Incomplete. She listened. She always did. Over the next months, as she grew weaker, we talked more than we had in our entire marriage. About our early days. About the boys. About the nights she had cried quietly beside me, thinking I didn't care. "I knew you cared," she told me once. "I just didn't feel seen." That sentence has followed me for 20 years. I had loved her. Deeply. Faithfully. But love that stays locked inside doesn't always reach the other person. When she died, the house changed. Not just physically. The air itself felt different. I had spent 40 years not saying enough. And now there was no one left to say it to. The boys were grown by then. They had families of their own. They visited. They called. But there is a particular kind of loneliness that comes from knowing you missed your chance to be fully known by the person who shared your bed for 4 decades. After the funeral, I found one of her journals. She had written about small things. Weather, recipes, conversations with friends. There was one entry about me. "He tries in his own way," she wrote. "I just wish he would let me in." I sat at the kitchen table and cried in a way I hadn't cried since I was a child. Not loud. Just steady. What can't be fixed is not the mistakes themselves. It's the time around them. I cannot go back to that young man who thought silence was strength. I cannot sit beside Anna in our small first apartment and say, "I'm scared too." I cannot show up at that school play or kneel beside my sons and tell them I am proud. I can tell them now. And I have. But it's different. They hear me as an old man trying to tidy up loose ends. Not as the father they needed at 10 or 12. There are moments when I sit in my chair by the window and wonder how different things might have been if I had chosen honesty earlier. Not dramatic honesty. Not confessions of terrible secrets. Just the simple truth of how I felt. I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what I'm doing. "I need you." Those words could have changed the texture of our life. Instead, I chose silence because it felt safer, because it matched the example I had seen, because I thought endurance was more important than expression. If you're listening to me now, I won't tell you what you should do. I have no authority left for that. I will only tell you what it feels like to reach 88 and realize that being strong and being closed are not the same thing. It feels heavy, not crushing. I have had a good life in many ways. I am grateful for my children, for the years I did have with Anna, for the ordinary days that passed without disaster. But gratitude and regret can live in the same room. If this story meant something to you, maybe sit with it for a while. Think about the conversations you've postponed, the words you've assumed were understood. Time has a way of shrinking when you aren't looking at it. I used to think I had decades to say what mattered. Now I measure time in seasons, maybe in months. I don't fear death the way I once did. What I fear is leaving behind things unsaid again. So I speak more now. Even if my voice shakes, even if it feels unfamiliar, it won't undo the silence I chose. But maybe it will soften the edges of what remains. I'm 88 years old, and if I could trade one thing for my past, it wouldn't be money or promotions or even years. It would be the courage to speak when it would have mattered most. The house is quiet again tonight. I still find myself wanting to tell Anna small things. About the weather. About the way the light falls in the afternoon. About how sorry I am. I say it out loud sometimes, just in case. And then I sit back, and I let the quiet answer me the way it always has.